Hi, thank you for streaming one of our latest messages here at Mountain Lake Church. We hope you enjoyed the message. Please come back again very, very soon. We know that life change stories happen. They happen every day. And at Mountain Lake Church, we want to hear about your life change story. If you'd like to share your story, please visit us at mountainlake.tv and click on the story button. You can also find service locations as well as times. And if you can't come to see us in person, please know that we stream our services every Sunday at 9, 10:30, and noon. We look forward to seeing you this weekend.
Now, I don't know about you, but my guess is you've had a plan in life and something happens and you change that plan. Now, just by a show of hands, I'd like to know how many of you are the planner in your family or in your business. Just by a show of hands, you got everything planned down. Okay, it's on your phone, and then you put it like on paper in case your phone, doesn't work, and so you've got everything planned out. I've had a plan that happened this weekend that changed, and so Brianna, she left out of town Thursday, and she returns back this afternoon. She's in Illinois. Her grandfather's 80th birthday was this weekend, so she took Micah, the youngest, out there and left the older three with me. And so, yes. Much respect to all you mothers out there sitting. And so they're alive and well. And so that's a win for our family, right? And so she gets back and they're alive and well. But so she left Thursday and I kind of had things planned out. We're going to go eat here. We're going to go to the park here. And we went to the movies, the three of them, because I thought, man, 2 hours in a dark room, peace and quiet for Dad, it's a win for everybody. And so I had it planned out. I planned it out so much where I bought the tickets on my phone ahead of time so we wouldn't have to wait in line. I planned it out to where we ate before we went to the theater so we don't have to pay $80 for a bucket of popcorn. Had it all planned out. And I got all three kids and I'm walking in there and we're good. We're about to go into the theater. And then Kara, my little girl, she goes, "Daddy?" I go, "Yeah." She goes, "I got to go potty." And I look at her and say what any dad would say, "Hold it." And this movie's 2 hours, just hold it, just cross your legs, you'll be fine. We got 3 kids. She goes, "No, Daddy, I really got to go. And I was like, And so if it's been a while since you've had 3 little kids, going to the bathroom is a bit of a interesting experience, challenge. And so 3 of them, and I'm looking around, and there's a family restroom. So I'm like, this is great. And so we all 3 go in there, and it's kind of a circus, right? You go to the bathroom, the other 2 of you face the wall, let them go, okay, and then rotate around, and then the little one can't reach the sink, and so you got to pick them up, and they Superman into the sink like that, and they wash their hands, and just don't touch anything. Like, "Well, look at what's on the ground, Dad." You're like, "No, just don't touch anything." And it was just this craziness, and we get out of the bathroom, and everyone went potty, and we're all good, and it's like, and I'm feeling good, and I'm having this very proud dad moment. I'm walking with my kids and just walking through the theater, and everyone's just looking at me, and I'm feeling really good. And then Kara goes, "Daddy, look at your shoe. And David goes, "Oh, Dad, look what's on your shoe." And I look down, and there's a stream of toilet paper running back there. I'm going, I feel like I'm in a movie myself. And so I wasn't going to dare touch the toilet paper. And so I did the walk of shame back to the bathroom and kind of did the dance and shook it off in there. So I tell you that because there was something happened, and then there was a plan that got changed. And we had a plan for this weekend. We were going to continue in the series of James. I prepared a message out of James chapter 4 and was going to get ready to preach it this weekend. And then I, like many of you, woke up Friday morning to the news and the tragedy and the violence that happened in Dallas and began to read through that. And as I read and the news and the details came out, I began to think back to the news and details of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile. And then a few weeks earlier, the shootings in Orlando. And then I just began to think about really the thousands of tragedies and the violent things that happen around our country that never make the news, that none of us ever see or hear about. And I just thought it was very important that we as a church begin to process this together. It's on the top of everyone's minds. It's on the social media. It's all over the place. It's on the news. And so I've changed the plan and rewrote the message Friday and Saturday. And myself, along with many other pastors across the country, rewrote their messages in light of the events that happened this week. And I can tell you I've done that before, and rewriting a message on Friday and Saturday. It's not an easy task, but it's doable, and you can do that. But I can tell you after this weekend, rewriting a message while watching 3 kids while your wife is out of town is a whole new ball game. And so if you like the message, it's purely by the grace of God, purely by the grace of God. And if you don't like the message, well, my 3 kids probably don't care because they got to eat pancakes for lunch, cereal for dinner, and cookies in between. So it was a good weekend for them. But as I begin to think, just about these tragedies that we have seen unfold and just the videos and the different viewpoints, I begin to think about them. And then, gosh, just as you go back, and especially over the recent years with the invention of social media, the unfortunate thing is that tragedies and violence, they're not a new thing. They've been around since human beings have walked the earth, and I don't know if you realize or not, but you don't make it 4 chapters into the Bible before the first murder takes place. Like you go Genesis 1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, Cain kills Abel, brother kills brother, and it's been happening ever since. And then you go to the New Testament, you're thinking maybe it'll be better then. Man, the New Testament doesn't make it 2 chapters into it before you read about King Herod killing all of the baby boys. And so violence and tragedies have been happening since humans have been walking the earth, and it's important for us as a church to begin to process it. And I understand that for many of you, it's going to take weeks or months, or maybe many of you sometimes years to begin to process through these things. But just as a church, as a body, I want us to begin to unpack these things. And today, I just want to answer 2 questions for us as a church today. 2 questions that I've been asked when I've walked other people through tragedies, 2 questions that I've asked myself, and 2 questions that I think we need to ask and answer today. And the 2 questions are this, in light of us as a church, as a body of believers. Number 1, when it comes to tragedy, how should we feel? How should we feel? I've got all these feelings and emotions, but really, how should I feel? And then the second question is, how should we respond? How should we respond? How should we feel, and how should we respond? If you've got your Bibles, grab them. And if not, it'll be on the screen. I need you to go to 2 places. I need you to go to John 17 and put a thumb there, or a little ribbon or something, and then we're going to be there in a minute. And then I need you to go to Psalm chapter 39 and chapter 40. John 17, you mark it there, and then go to Psalm 39 and 40. And King David, he writes these 2 chapters in Psalm 39 and 40. King David was known as a man after God's own heart, and the only person in the Bible to be given that title. And what I love about the Psalms, and when you read the ones that are written by David, was the guy that killed Goliath, was the king of the land, and he really exposes his innermost thoughts and ideas. Like his emotions in Psalms are all over the board. And I love it because he just bears his heart and soul on paper, and we get to read it. And he just unloads on God on everything that he's thinking and feeling and his emotions that he's going through. And my guess is that's why he writes in Psalm 139, God, you've made me so wonderfully complex. God has made each and every one of us wonderfully complex with different emotions and different feelings and different backgrounds and different perspectives on these tragedies. Right? And some of you look at these tragedies and you're experiencing just deep sadness. Some of you read about these tragedies and you've got this righteous anger building up inside of you. Some of you read these tragedies and you just feel hopeless or you feel helpless. Some of you read about these tragedies and you're just numb to the whole thing. Some of you are confused, some of you are anxious, some of you are fearful to even step foot outside of your door. We all come into this room with very different feelings and emotions when it comes to these tragedies. The ones on the recent news, but really the ones that happen in our lives on a regular basis. And so how should we feel when it comes to tragedy in our life? And really, how should we respond? And in Psalm 39, David begins to process really out loud for us some things that he's feeling, some emotions that he's feeling when it comes to evil people around him. And you're going to see this whole array of emotions and feelings that David begins to process through. Psalm 39, verse 1. I said to myself, and this is David writing, he said, I will watch what I do and not sin in what I say. I will hold my tongue when the ungodly are around me. But as I stood there in silence, not even speaking of good things, the turmoil within me grew worse. And so he's writing about the evil around him, the ungodly people around him, and his first answer is, you know what, I'm just going to remain silent. I'm just gonna begin to process through it in silence. He says, but as I stood there, the turmoil or this inner righteous anger began to stir up inside of me. And look as he processes through it, verse 3. He says, the more I thought about it, the hotter I got, igniting a fire of words. And so in just 3 verses, he goes from, I'm gonna stand here in silence, and I'm gonna process through it, to, gosh, man, the more I think about it, the hotter I get, and to the end going, I'm just gonna unload the things that I'm thinking and feeling. Here's what he says, verse 4. Lord, remind me how brief my time on earth will be. Remind me that my days are numbered, how fleeting my life is. You've made my life no longer than the width of my hand. My entire lifetime is just a moment to you. At best, each of us is but a breath. And he's just rehearsing in his mind just the frailty of life and the shortness of life. There's the ungodly, I'm going to remain silent. But the more I thought about it, the worse it grew inside of me. So he begins to unload and just going, God, life is so short, and it honestly feels meaningless. It's just the width of my hand. And he continues on, verse 6. He says, we are merely moving shadows, and all our busy rushing ends in nothing. We heap up wealth not knowing who will spend it. And then he kind of gets to the end, you kind of get this helpless feeling from David. Going, what is the point of life? There's all this evil around me. We save up all this money and we heap up all this wealth and we're going to die. We don't know. It's just, he kind of gets to this point of going, what gives? Then look at verse 7. And so, Lord, where do I put my hope? And he answers his own question. He says, my only hope is in you. And I love it because David begins to walk through all of these things that he's feeling, from I'll just remain silent and just let it happen, to I'm just gonna bottle up this righteous anger, to I'm gonna unload on it, to really life is so short, and really where do I put my hope? I've got this hopeless feeling. But then he comes to the conclusion, when it's all said and done, my only hope is in you. And with the tragedies that have happened with the Dallas shootings, or Alton Sterling, or Philando Castile, or the Orlando shootings, or any other tragedy or disaster that you see on the news or social media, you have all different types of feelings and emotions. So how should we feel? Well, we should feel how God has wired us to feel. We should feel how God has wired us to feel. We're made in the image of God. We're complex human beings. God did not make stoic robots to where when this happens, this is exactly how you should feel. And then when this disaster happens, this is the emotion that you should feel. God has made us wonderfully complex. And with that are a complexity of emotions and feelings. And as a pastor, unfortunately, I've been there with people when they walk through some very disastrous things. And it's usually the loss of a loved one. And you walk into the room or the funeral home, or they come in, and there's all sorts of different emotions. There's the people that process it, and they're crying uncontrollably, and they can barely breathe, and they're just there, and they're going through the emotions. And then there's the other side where they're just kind of stoic, and there's no tears, and they're just matter of fact in dealing with the facts and dealing with the things at hand. And either one, that's the way they feel, and that's the emotions that they're feeling. And it's not right for the people that are crying to look at those who aren't and going, well, don't you care? And it's not right for those that are not crying and dealing with it going, you got to get yourself together and handle it. That's why whenever you go to a counselor and you sit down with them, the counselor asks, what's going on? And you tell them, and the next question is, well, how does that make you feel? And when you begin to tell the counselor, this is how you makes me feel, no counselor says, well, you need to take those feelings, bottle them up, and suppress them down. Right? You feel, you have emotions, you're made wonderfully complex. And all of us, when we look at these things, look at it from very different viewpoints and perspectives. And for one person to say, well, this is how I'm feeling, the rest of you should feel that way. And the other group to say, no, this is how I feel, the rest of you should feel this way. You should feel the way God has wired you to feel. And at the end, you have to know when in all these emotions, whether it's sadness or whether it's just righteous anger or whether it's confusion, you can really tie them all together with this feeling of hopelessness. And David answers the question going, where do I find my hope? And he kind of comes to the conclusion going, my only hope is in God and in God alone. And so you have those feelings and you have those emotions, and you should feel and have those emotions the way God has wired you to feel and has wired you with those emotions. But knowing this, that your hope is in God and in God alone. And I'm just going to throw this out there. And I don't know what your church background is or faith background is, but you need to understand that it is okay to verbally process out loud before God. It is okay to tell God exactly how you're feeling there at that moment. God already knows your heart. He already knows what's on the inside. And what I love about David is he just begins to unload on God, going, God, this is how I feel. God, I'm scared. God, I'm nervous. God, I've got this righteous anger boiling up inside of me. God, I'm so confused. God, I'm just heartbroken. God's a big God with big shoulders, and you can unload on him what you're feeling and your emotions, knowing that your hope is in him and in him alone. And I do this, and I've unloaded on God verbally, and I usually do it in my car where there's no like Brianna or kids around. And if ever you see me driving down 400 and I'm like crying or yelling and there's nobody in the car, you're going, hey, that's our crazy pastor. No, just processing out loud before God. Right, so how should we feel? We should feel the way God has wired us to feel. So then the question is going, okay, how should we feel? We feel the way God has wired us to feel. Then how should we respond? The problem is when you allow your emotions or feelings to control your reactions or your response. We get in trouble when we allow our emotions and feelings to begin to control the way we react or the way we respond. And a great example of this in the New Testament is the disciple Simon Peter. He was known as the emotional disciple, and whatever he thought he said and whatever he thought he acted upon. And in one chapter, John 18, and it's there, and it's when Jesus is being arrested to go to the cross, and they're there, and the people are there, and Jesus willingly goes. In John 18, Simon Peter, he takes his sword and he slashes off the ear of one of the guys coming to arrest Jesus. And if you're new to church, you know, he wasn't like trying just to nip the ear off. It wasn't like he pulled his sword and went, like that. I mean, he was swinging, you know, the guy ducks, ear goes off. And Jesus picks up the ear and looks at Peter and goes, seriously? Just kidding, that's Chris Emmitt's paraphrase. Jesus didn't say that. But Jesus picks it up and he heals the guard. And then just a few verses later, when Jesus is on trial, Peter's around the campfire and fear comes over him. And do you know Jesus? No. Do you know Jesus? No. Do you know Jesus? 3 times he denies him. And so, yes, we're made beautifully complex. And yes, we have all sorts of emotions and feelings. But you have to come to this concrete place in your life going, my hope is in God and in God alone. And I'm not going to allow my emotions and my feelings to control my reactions or my responses. So how should we as the church, as the people of God, respond to the tragedies in our country and in our world? I need you to understand something first before you answer that. I need you to understand what Jesus prayed on the night before he was crucified. And if you've grown up in church, you know that Jesus was there and he prayed, but many of you may not know that Jesus, the night before he was crucified, specifically prayed for you. and he specifically prayed for me. And in John chapter 17, this prayer is captured. You need to understand what Jesus, don't miss, is the night before he was crucified, what he prayed in light of you and I sitting here today. John chapter 17, verse 20, he says, I'm praying not only for these disciples, the 11 that were there, but also for all who will ever believe in me through their message. All who would ever call themselves Christians, followers of Jesus, which if you call yourself a follower of Jesus, Jesus prayed for you the night before he was crucified. And look at specifically what he prayed for, verse 21. He says, I pray that they will all be one, just as you and I are one and you are in me. Father, and I am in you, may they be in us so that the world will believe you sent me. I have given them the glory you gave me, so they may be, there's the word, one, as we are one. I am in them and you are in me. May they experience such perfect, what? Perfect unity. That the world will know that you sent me and that you love them as much as you love me. Of all the things that Jesus could have prayed for us sitting here today, he prayed for unity. Father, that they would be one, that they would be unified, that they would be together, that they would be the people of God, that they would be the followers of Jesus. He doesn't go there and go and say, Father, now I need to pray for all these people who are going to be Christians. And Father, I pray that they would be divvied up by denominations. Now, Father, I pray that they would be going against big churches versus small churches versus medium churches. Father, I pray they'd be divvied up by contemporary worship or traditional worship. Father, I pray that they would be divvied up and isolated. He goes, no. Unity, oneness. That was his prayer, to be unified together. Fully understanding what would happen over the course of the past 2,000 years. Disasters and violence and tragedies. He goes, I pray that they would be one together and unified and in oneness as the people of God under one banner, the banner of Jesus Christ. Somewhere along the way, we became disunified and disjointed. And Jesus is going, my prayer for all who would ever call upon me is simply a unity and a oneness. So with that idea in mind, here's how David responds in chapter 40. He says, I waited patiently for the Lord to help me. And he turned to me and he heard my cry or my plea before God. He lifted me out of the pit of despair, out of the mud and the mire. And he set my feet on solid ground and steadied me as I walked along. He's given me a new song to sing, a hymn of praise to our God. And many will see what he has done and be amazed. They will put their trust in the Lord. The only thing David knew how to do or what to do is to simply cry out to God. I waited and I cried out, God, help me. And God heard my cry and he lifted me out of the pit of despair, out of the mud and the mire, and he set my feet on solid ground. And he's given me a new song to sing. And so how should we feel? We should feel the way God has wired us to feel. But how should we respond? We should respond with unity in prayer. We should respond as a unified people of God in prayer, crying out, saying, God, we're sad and we need you. God, we're hurting and we need you. God, we're angry and we need you. God, we're confused and we need you. God, we're hopeless and we're helpless and we're crying out to the one who can only provide us hope and help. God, we need you. And in light of the Dallas tragedy and Alton Sterling and Philando Castile and Orlando and all the other thousands of acts of violence that happen across our country, I wrote this question next to chapter 40. I just wrote this. I said, what if this was the prayer of the USA? Like, what if these 3 little verses became the prayer of the USA? It would sound something like this. It would say, he lifted us, the nation, out of the pit of despair, and he, out of the mud and the mire, and he set our nation on solid ground and steadied us as we walked along. He's giving us a new song to sing, a hymn of praise to our God for our nation. Many will see what he has done for us and be amazed, and they will put their trust in the Lord. And imagine if that became the prayer in the heart of our nation, going, God, we need you. God, we're confused. God, we're lost. God, we're angry. God, we're numb to the whole thing. And God, we're crying out in unity. Forget denominational lines. Forget the church size. God, we're locked arms as the people of God under the banner of Jesus Christ going, God, help. God, deliver. God, set our nation on solid ground. God, deliver us out of the mud and the mire. What would happen if that was the prayer, the heartbeat of the nation? And it starts with the church. And it doesn't just start with the local church, the Mountain Lake Church. It starts with the church at large, the global church. And to lock arms and say, we're unified together in prayer. And yes, we all come at it with different feelings and with different emotions and different perspectives and different things going on the inside, but we lock our arms and say, God, we are unified in prayer, and God, we are praying desperately, not only for our country, but for our world. How should we respond? Simply unified in prayer. How should we feel? We should feel the way God has wired us to feel, but we come together unified under the banner of Jesus. And so here's what I'm going to ask you to do, the church and the local church, meaning Mountain Lake Church. I'm going to ask that you would commit to pray 7 specific prayers over the next 7 days. Starting today, pray 7 prayers over the next 7 days, and they're very specific prayers. And I know all of you read the news and the tragedies and the violence, and you all have different feelings and emotions, but we can come together unified and say together as the local church. And for Forsyth County Mountain Lake Church, these are the 7 specific things that we're praying over the next 7 days. And here are the prayers, just as I've been thinking about this a lot for the past 48 hours. These are the 7 prayers that I would love for us as a church to pray together. Prayer number 1, starting today, is this: that God's glory would be sensed through the tragedies. Pray that God's glory would be sensed through the tragedies, through the hurt and the confusion and the pain, that his glory and his goodness and his mercy and his love would overshadow everything. And in the midst of the chaos, his glory would be known by all across the globe, that God's glory would be sensed through the tragedies. Prayer number 2 on day number 2. Pray for the leaders of our country for wisdom. Pray for the leaders of our country for wisdom. The men and women that lead this country, that they would have godly wisdom as they begin to make decisions that affect all of us. Just say, God, we lift up our leaders of this country. God, we ask that you would give them wisdom that can only come from God. Prayer number 3 on day number 3. To pray for the law enforcement that are on the front lines every single day. Prayer 3 on day 3, to pray for the law enforcement, the men and women that step forward on the front lines, that kiss husband or wife or son or daughter or mom or dad goodbye, knowing that that may be the last time they ever see them, and they step on the front lines and they live in tragedy when the rest of us just view it online. And if you've ever talked to men and women who serve in law enforcement, then you know that is a very real thing. Pray for the law enforcement, day 3. Prayer number 4, day 4. Pray for the families and the friends of the victims. Families and friends of the victims, because the people that died left behind, moms or dads, brothers or sisters, husbands or wives, loved ones, friends and families, they're having to move forward in life without their friend or without their family member. And so we are going to come together on day 4 and begin to pray for those families and friends who have lost the loved ones. Day 4, prayer 4. Day 5, prayer 5. I want us to come together as a church and pray that justice would be served. Justice would be served. That the truth would surface, that the truth would win out, and that justice would be served. Prayer prayer 6 on day 6. I want us to pray for the communities in which the tragedies happened. Pray for the communities specifically in which these tragedies happened, and specifically pray that these communities would see each other as people, as souls, and through no other lens or filter. That they would see each other for people that live in the same community and not base anything off of background or race or socioeconomic status. But you live in my community, and together that these communities are unified. And so on day 6, we're going to pray that these communities are unified together as they begin to walk through these tragedies that have happened. And then on day 7, prayer number 7 is this. We're going to pray for the churches in the communities in which the tragedies happened. Specifically, those local churches there in those communities in which the tragedies have happened. These churches that are there, and they're literally on the front lines being the hands and feet to the people that are walking through these tragedies. And we're going to pray for the leadership, or we're going to pray for the congregation and the body that meets, regardless of denominational lines, regardless of worship style or size. We are a church community here in Forsyth County, and we're going to pray for those churches in those specific communities that are walking their communities through these disasters and through these tragedies. And we, as a church, I'm asking that we would be unified together and say we're going to cry out to God 7 specific prayers over the next 7 days. And I would encourage you to have some type of reminder, and I think they'll put them up there on the screen, and you can take a picture of them. We're going to put them on our social media this week, or if you're on our email list, you'll get them every single day, so they'll be out there. But just 7 things that we're going to pray for. And I would just encourage you to figure out some reminder on how to pray for these. Maybe it's anytime you hear a police siren, that you hear that, or you see a police car, you begin to pray through these things. Or maybe, since there's 7 prayers in 7 days, anytime you see the number 7, man, on your watch or your phone or the microwave, you just begin to pray. Or gosh, maybe next time you buy a $7 cup of coffee from Starbucks, that's a reminder that you pray. Right? But figure out whatever it is as a reminder, and just saying, God, together, I'm unified with the local church called Mountain Lake Church. And God, I know there's believers all over this county that are coming together and praying for these 7 specific things over these next 7 days. And just as a church, it's important that we begin to walk through this together and understand that we all come at it from different viewpoints and perspectives and different feelings and emotions, and we should feel the way God has wired us to feel. But we should respond unified and in prayer. And here's what I'm going to ask us to do. I'm going to ask us to pray together today specifically for number 1, that God's glory would be sensed through these tragedies. So I'm going to ask if you would stand up right where you're at. We're going to enter into a moment of prayer. And then I'm going to ask you to do something that some of you, you're going to be weirded out. You'll get over it, but I need you to grab the hand of the person next to you, whether you know them or not, just to show a sense of unity, that we're coming together as a church. And this is your first time. You're part of the family now. Welcome. And we're gonna pray together, unified. And we all have different feelings and emotions, but we're gonna come together unified as the church body and say, God, we need you. Let's pray. Father, we come before you as the local church called Mountain Lake Church. And God, we hurt. God, and some of us are just confused. God, some of us are angry. Some of us are fearful, anxious, nervous, numb, or a mixture of all those together. And we thank you that you are a good God with big shoulders. And we know that our hope only comes from you. And God, together we come unified as the church. And we cry out to you for our nation. God, that you would lift us out of the mud and the mire. God, you would set this nation on solid ground. One nation under God. God, that you would give this nation a new song to sing. And when people see that, they would give you and you alone glory. And Father, we come together today and ask that the glory of God would be sensed through these tragedies. Heartbreaking, as disastrous as they are. God, my prayer is that your grace and your love and your sovereignty, God, would be sensed. That your glory would be felt. And that the nations would turn to you. Lord, you see all these things unfold on the news or social media, and you just sit there and go, not again, not again. Lord, just as personally as a husband, as a father raising kids in this world, as the pastor of this church, as someone who cares deeply for everybody here today, God, so easy to allow the feeling of hopelessness just to surround me. So God, I know nothing else to do other than to cry out and say, God help. God help. Help our nation. Help our world sense your glory and your goodness. And lift us out of the pit of despair and set our feet on solid ground, God. We ask these things in your name.